From the station working for you, this is WRTV News at 5:30, streaming now.
Now at 5:30, food banks working to meet a growing need. Money, food, or volunteers, what they need most right now. Chris.
Topping our lineup today, many families depend on carpooling, but we are seeing COVID cases popping up because of this, and we're taking a look at some options when it comes to carpooling safety. And they often go unnoticed, but they are some of the most essential parts of our nation's economy. How the pandemic is affecting migrant workers and the small businesses they help support. And the pandemic has changed our shopping habits, and some of them could cause you to overspend. We have helped to retrain your brain as we do head into the holidays so you don't end up breaking your budget.
First at 5:30, 8 months into the pandemic, and the need is as great as ever to help feed Hoosiers struggling to put food on the table. The effects of the pandemic have doubled the need for food banks in central Indiana, and it has not been easy to meet that demand. Gleaners and some other food banks have lost their #1 source of donations, grocery store surplus.
At the start of the pandemic, that stopped. Retail stores didn't have the surplus food to donate to food banks or other hunger relief organizations. And then as they gradually, store by store, might have had a little surplus, the staff don't have the time to deal with that. They don't have the time to set it aside and call us and say, you have a pickup. And so we stopped all of those routes going to the retail stores. So we lost the largest source of food. We saw the need double, and we've had to make up for the difference with purchasing.
Pre-pandemic, Gleaners was buying about 8.5% of the food it distributed. Now it consistently more than 40%. To put that in actual numbers, in a given week in 2019 before COVID-19, Gleaners would spend about $10,000 or $12,000 on food. In 2020, that cost might be $700,000 to $800,000 a week. So what can you do? Food banks across the state need money and volunteers. Food donations are also welcome, but monetary donations can help more people for the same value. And a reminder, Gleaners will hold a food distribution event Saturday at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Fruits, vegetables, meats, spices, and Halloween treats will be available at the Brickyard Food Drive. Anthem will also provide free flu shots at the event that will run from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. You should enter at the track at Gate 2 off of West 16th Street. Kevin.
And Amanda, you mentioned next Saturday. That will be a nice day. The nice days kind of stick out in the 7-day planners you'll see in a little bit. I'll be able to update this anytime because I think we're going to jump over 4 inches now for the month of October. Of course, it's raining now, so this is a work in progress with the likelihood of another widespread 1 to 2 inches of rain, if not more, when we get to Thursday. There are the rain showers. They're heaviest Terre Haute to Sullivan to Vincennes southwest. That will continue to move to the northeast. You can see just south of Effingham towards Sullivan and Terre Haute. There are the temperatures, 46 in Indianapolis now with rain, 49 in Bloomington, and that wind is light. Tomorrow during the day, lots of cloud cover. There will be some showers. Notice what doesn't happen. Temperature doesn't warm up much, 43 degrees through 11 a.m. Afternoon temperature of about 47, maybe 48 or 49, but that's it, well below your 62-degree average temperature. We'll look ahead, talk about a dry day before our bigger rain event coming up. We'll do that here in just a little bit.
Damage control from the White House after Chief of Staff Mark Meadows said they would not control the pandemic. The story starting our news feed. The head of strategic communications for the White House now saying they have not given up on trying to control the virus. The White House says it is working to get a vaccine and flatten the curve. AstraZeneca says its vaccine is producing effective results for both older and younger adults. This raises hopes that a vaccine could be approved by the end of the year. They specifically said they have seen success in treating the elderly. Now, Dr. Anthony Fauci said it will be a matter of weeks before we know the findings of a potential vaccine. He says that we will know if it's safe and effective by either the end of November or just the start of December. Well, we have reached another concerning milestone in the pandemic. Last week, the U.S. recorded the highest number of new virus cases of any 7-day stretch, nearly 500,000. That included 2 back-to-back highest single-day records on Friday and Saturday, both over 80,000. This data is from Johns Hopkins University. Now, while cases are on a dangerous upswing, deaths are mostly flat. Now, check out these charts from the Washington Post. The top one is virus cases, the bottom, the U.S. death rate. Experts say that is in part because we have learned how to better care for COVID-19 patients.
I think that survival is better for two reasons. One is we do have somewhat better knowledge of how to treat. The proning particularly seems to be effective. Not putting people on ventilators turns out to be an important clinical improvement in our care plan.
Experts say the standard treatment of getting oxygen face down in the prone position is more effective. The steroid dexamethasone has shown to cut deaths by about 30% for those on ventilators. Remdesivir was just approved by the FDA as the only COVID-19 treatment because it helps shorten recovery time of some patients. Now, convalescent plasma is also used, but there is new research suggesting it's not that effective for reducing deaths or preventing a positive patient from getting even sicker. But another reason the death rate is lower has to do with the shift in who's getting affected.
Younger people are getting infected. And having a distribution of younger people who are infected makes it so that your outcomes are going to look better.
The lower death rate may continue, the CDC has warned, as more young people get infected. They are likely spreading the virus to more vulnerable populations. All right, next in our lineup, many families depend on carpooling, but we are seeing COVID cases popping up because of this. So we're taking a look at some of your options for when it comes to carpooling safety. Facebook is preparing for election-related conflict. It plans on slowing the spread of viral content and will also lower the bar for banning certain posts. Now, these tools are usually used in at-risk countries like Sri Lanka and Myanmar. Now, health officials in northeastern states are warning of carpool clusters. Now, that's the risk of spreading the coronavirus among people who commute together or share rides for sports. Connecticut and Rhode Island have both seen such clusters of cases. Carpooling may seem like the safer option compared to public transportation, but an expert tells us it is just not that simple.
You're making this trade-off we make a lot, I think. You are saying longer intimate contact with a select group of people versus perhaps less close intimate contact with, a wider group of people.
Associate Professor Justin Lessler says more modern public transit may have better ventilation, but you do lose some control over the risk. So if you do end up going to carpool, Lessler says it's important to talk to others in your rideshare about what they think is safe or unsafe, because one of the biggest drivers of the risk is what they do outside the carpool.
You're sort of deciding to, be a pod, this idea of having groups of people who share risk.
CDC has released guidelines on carpooling. Besides the standard cleanliness, masks, distancing, you should also check your car settings and make sure the air conditioning or heat is set to bring in fresh air from outside the car, not recirculate it, and ride with the same people for each carpool. All right, more in our lineup. They often go unnoticed, but they are some of the most essential parts of our nation's economy. How the pandemic is affecting migrant workers and the small businesses they help support. New guidelines for moms fighting opioid addiction. It starts our newsfeed. The American Academy of Pediatrics says pregnant women should have access to opioid medication, but they worry the pandemic is making issues of addiction worse. And Pope Francis has promoted the Archbishop of Washington to the position of cardinal. Wilton Gregory is now the first African American to hold that position in the Catholic Church's highest governing body. Home sales fell 3.5% in September. The market was strong over the summer, even though there was a decrease, and the Commerce Department pointed out that there are sales that went up by more than 32% compared to last year. Well, this election has already been one of the most contentious in modern history, but for one family, it's their most memorable. In 1920, their matriarch cast her vote as she was battling pneumonia during the 1918 flu pandemic. Well, as Dan Grossman shows us, it has defined a tradition in their family for the last 100 years.
My mother was the daughter of a Civil War veteran.
In Helen Merrill's household, tradition is built on reverence.
We grew up with all these stories about patriotism and the flag and honoring your country and honoring the people who served.
A respect for family values.
I'm just proud of the powerful family that I came from.
That has led this 91-year-old to instill in her children what was instilled in her so many years ago.
That all kind of meshes together with me.
In 1918, Helen's mother, Blanche, got sick during that year's flu pandemic and was bedridden in a coma. Doctors didn't expect her to make it through the night.
Her hair all fell out and she just was in bed for a long time.
But the next morning, to the doctor's surprise, her heart was still beating and it was still full of pride. It would take Blanche more than 2 years to recover. So in 1920, when the suffrage movement led to the right for women to vote, Helen's father hitched up a wagon with a straw bed and wheeled her into town so she could come to a place and cast her vote, setting a precedent for the family for the next century.
I can't think of anyone in our family that doesn't vote.
Helen's daughter Andrea learned from a young age there are 3 constants: death, taxes, and the process we use to determine the people who make the policies for them.
It is the one way we can have a voice, and sometimes it's the only time we have a voice.
Which is why this year, on the 100th anniversary of her grandmother's triumph, Andrea and Helen head to the polls with a certain pride.
I did it to honor my mother because I think if she were here today and she could know that I could sit in my kitchen at the table and cast my ballot and not have to ride in a wagon or anything, not have to leave sick babies behind, I think she would be amazed. And I'm just so filled with gratitude that I live in this country and the great privileges we have.
In our hyper-politicized culture, these women only have one condemnation, and it is nothing to do with party or politics.
This year, more than any other year, I have felt the urgency to get my ballot turned back in.
Just a revered tradition built on their family values.
I have a slogan: if you don't vote, don't talk to me, I think. You've already lost your privilege to be critical.
I'm Dan Grossman reporting.
A new feature on Apple's latest iPhone update is causing controversy and confusion. It has to do with COVID tracking. Consumer reporter John Matarese looks into whether they are watching you so you don't waste your money.
Do you have an Apple iPhone? There's a lot of confusion these days over its COVID tracking feature. Some people want it, some people don't want it, and a lot of people are just plain confused. Yes, it's true. Apple's iOS 13.5 update over the summer added a COVID tracking feature to your iPhone, but that doesn't mean the government is spying on you, according to both Apple and reports in ZDNet and 9to5Mac. You will need to activate the system with help from a local health department for it to work. You can find it by going to Settings, Privacy, and Health, and look for COVID-19 exposure logging. It explains that an authorized app is required to turn the feature on. But from the Doesn't That Stink file, fears that Apple is secretly tracking you for COVID-19. First of all, if your location services are on, your phone keeps a record of where you've been. That's not new. But there is no truth to rumors that Apple or the government is checking to see if you're near people infected with the coronavirus. You have to turn the feature on for that to happen. And people with the virus would have to turn the feature on too. No smartphone can simply sniff out the virus in the air. Bottom line, no one is tracking your phone for COVID exposure unless you want them to. As always, don't waste your money. I'm John Matarese, WRTV.
I thought we'd start with a national view. We're cool here, but we're warmer than Dallas, Texas. I'll let that soak in for a second. How about that? 46 in Indy, 2 degrees cooler in Dallas, but anywhere from Canada plunging all the way to the deep south in Texas, temperatures very cold for this time of the year. It is 14 in Denver. I don't know if you saw any of the football game there over the weekend. Kansas City was in town. They had snow and temperatures in the lower teens with a wind chill around 0. Looking for warmth? Florida. 84 in Miami, 80 in New Orleans. And of course, New Orleans is going to have another tropical system. Looks like a hurricane will arrive there Wednesday, spread some rain our way on Thursday. There is the transition zone from the relatively mild temperatures, although way colder than average, the 40s to the 30s and colder as you go back to the north and west. You can see some snow north of St. Louis, probably melting on contact with the ground. There's your steady rain as it moves across Interstate 57 and south of I-70, continuing to move towards central Indiana. Again, I think the heavier rainfall amounts, 1/4 to 1/2 inch rainfall amounts, will be south of Indy. Okay, promised you an update there, and the last time we talked, now we're 3/100 of an inch further along. 4.02 is our October rainfall total so far. We may add another 1 to 2 inches, if not more, Thursday. Rain continues tonight at least through 10, then I think it will taper off. Don't expect any dramatic change in our temperature this week. It won't get out of the 40s during the day tomorrow, and then we're stuck really in the 50s. As far as additional rainfall tonight, there you see to the south, Bloomington, Columbus, down to Bedford and Seymour, maybe Vincennes, see some 1/2 inch rainfall amounts. Tomorrow, 49 degrees, modest temperature this time of the year. We jump almost 10 degrees. It's dry Wednesday. Enjoy the little dry stretch there because rain will swing back in as we get to Thursday, and the heavy rain potential comes with that, especially in the southern half of the state. As I mentioned, a widespread 2-inch rainfall with some isolated higher amounts possible as we have 2 different weather systems combine to bring us that very wet day. We'll talk about Friday and beyond coming up.
Let's start the news. The IRS wants to make sure parents have time to register for stimulus payments for children. Those who already received the initial $1,200 but have not received the $500 for their kids have until November 21st to sign up. September 30th was the initial deadline. New restrictions for at least a month in Italy. The country shutting down places like gyms, pools, and theaters. Now, Italy to decide against going on a nationwide lockdown because of the potential economic impacts. Airlines are not kidding around when it comes to masks. Delta says it banned more than 400 people from flying for not following its mask policy. Migrants working on farms and ranches have been feeling the effects of this pandemic, and as Dan Grossman shows us, the struggles they've experienced this year are now trickling down into communities.
In the trickle-down nature of economics,
it's hard.
what affects migrant workers like David Perez?
This year is one the historians will love, and a year we'll be glad to end.
Affects farmers like Bruce Talbot,
So we depend on them.
which in turn affects community organization directors like Carolyn Dunn.
We get the good harvest yesterday.
But we start with David, a man who's just thankful he wasn't cut from his job like so many others on the peach farm where he has worked in Palisade, Colorado for the last 24 years.
It's hard to stay, far away from the family, but that's the way.
David works here on an H-2A visa, which allows him legal residence for certain working months without becoming a citizen. It offers him a living that supports his wife and 5 children who live just outside of Mexico City.
They don't have enough way to get money, just me.
But once the pandemic hit, others weren't as fortunate, as this farm that normally supplies 50 migrant workers with a living wage was forced to cut its workforce to 8.
Some guys ended up going back home against their will. Others chose to go back home. Our guys really like working here.
For the farmer's manager, Bruce Talbot, the decision was not easy. The pandemic slashed demand from restaurants and farmers markets he relies on for business, but had to close, forcing Talbot to let go of most of his workers.
A good number of the guest workers.
It has led to a busy last few months for Carolyn Dunn, who works as the executive director of Palisade's Child and Migrant Services.
The gentleman who just called told me, looks like my work is over for this season, and I'd like to come by and get a meal.
Since March, her organization has supplied migrant workers with free meals and hand sanitizer while also pitching in on rent, utilities, and food for groceries.
I forecast a lot of belt tightening and struggling, honestly, to keep bills paid.
Here and in other communities with similar workforces, the effects are felt in local stores, as migrant workers can make up to 20% of the population during harvest season, bringing money to the local economy.
Our local grocery store has made the comment that if we have a peach crop, he has a profitable year. If we don't have a peach crop, he breaks even.
In a year where everyone has been forced to make cuts to their budget, the struggle only continues to trickle down. I'm Dan Grossman.
Dan, thank you. And finally, in our lineup today, the pandemic has changed our shopping habits, and some of them could cause you to overspend, but we have some ways that you can retrain your brain as we head into the holidays so you don't end up breaking your budget. All the big box stores are already offering holiday deals. They're ramping them up even more at the beginning of November because of how the pandemic is changing Black Friday shopping. But our online shopping habits from the pandemic, really from the start, you might remember buying something maybe because you just felt anxious, sad, or frustrated. Well, those bad habits could be leading to you overspending right now.
You're just so determined to feel better that you suddenly care less about the price. So there are these financial aspects that can build on top of those emotional ones.
The personal finance expert that we spoke with says our emotions throw off any sort of spending rules that we've set for ourselves. To reverse the spending habits you may have picked up, experts say it typically used to take 3 weeks.
Experts have been saying lately that it takes longer than that, 2 to 3 months, it could be more. And the thing with building a habit is not necessarily that you do it perfectly every time, but that you take steps and learn as you go.
Other things to do to retrain your brain include making your budget official. The expert we talked with says if you write it down and put it in a place you can see, you'll be better off. That's because you're not just relying on your brain to know the rules that you set for yourself. Also, set yourself a shopping curfew. Researchers say you have to know your body and when you may be worn down and more likely to overspend. Now, as the days become shorter, educators are thinking of ways to keep students mentally healthy and physically active. Here's Chris Conti with a story that he's putting together for tomorrow. As COVID cases and positivity rates spike across the country, some schools are struggling to keep kids in the classroom, while others are simply moving their schools outdoors. Tomorrow, we'll show you how outdoor classrooms are helping kids stay educated while also helping with their mental health.
Numbers. Parker.
With several opportunities for rain in the forecast, just want to remind you the Storm Shield app is free, very helpful. It will send any alerts to your phone. Of course, it gives you access to the radar as well to see how much time you have before you get wet. We don't have any more time in this half hour, but the news starts at 6 right now.